Hello, Sweeney Seeker here. I found an article online that I thought was very interesting. It's called The Pathology of Betty Broderick Supporters, and I'll read it to you here. Maybe it's time to focus directly on the phenomenon of the fan clubs that spring up to support these murdering menaces to society like Betty Broderick. There's a lot we can see very clearly about them, but what is going on that we cannot see? Here is what I see in the Betty Broderick fan club members that we meet and interact with here and on other sites. They have turned Betty's defense strategies into a holy gospel. If Betty said it, it's the truth. Betty's own strategies and excuses have been built upon, added to, and stretched into a larger mythology that is accepted and repeated again and again as being factual. Inside this mythology, Betty did nothing terrible. She just broke or snapped. No explanation is offered as to why Betty has the full right to break or snap when others are not afforded the same privilege, most notably Dan and Linda. The myth is repeated over and over again like mantra, almost in Betty's identical words. Betty's fans are morally outrageous people, but their own behavior is morally outrageous. They hunt down, taunt, harass, abuse, and even threaten Dan and Linda's survivors. They lie, manipulate, and fabricate in their attempts to shut people up who are critical of Betty or in agreement with her sentence. But they truly believe themselves to be very good, loving, and compassionate people, and will tell you all about it at the drop of a pin. Betty's fans are very big on supporting Betty's rights and each other's, but they don't believe in anyone else's rights. Not society's to incarcerate murderers, and not the right of anyone to speak out against Betty's crime and abuses. Betty's fans are seemingly all women. I've never been witness to one of them having anything good to say about any man for any reason. Betty's fans deny the abuse she subjected her children to, despite the facts that we have some of it on tape. When discussing Betty, her fans consistently fail to mention the fact that she killed 2 people or caused her children any undue stress in doing so. Like Betty, her fans' behaviors are inconsistent with their claims. Betty's fans practice every abusive form of communication known to man, yet they cannot forgive or excuse Dan and Linda for being abusive. Many of Betty's fans despise Linda more than they do Dan. The mere mention of her name sends many of them into ravenous fits of rage. Like Betty, her fans are confused as on the definition of the word abuse. They frequently accuse others of abusing them, but when asked for specifics, they go silent. None of Betty's fans, to my knowledge, have ever stood up and clearly stated that Dan and Linda did not deserve what they got. Many of them have clearly stated that they got what they deserved. Betty's fans believe that until Dan began his affair with Linda, Betty ran a perfect house, was a perfect mother, and a wonderful human being. Now they believe that she is a perfect prisoner and that she would function perfectly in society should she be released. Betty's fans do not believe that Betty should have been convicted or imprisoned for her crimes. They bemoan the fact that prejudicial, unsubstantiated, and spurious evidence was not allowed by the judge and believe that it is due to this that she was convicted. The fact that she actually did kill 2 people doesn't seem to sink in. Betty's fans have expressed directly to a jury. Betty's fans practice every abusive form of communication known to man, yet they cannot forgive or excuse Dan and Linda for being abusive. Many of Betty's fans despise Linda more than they do Dan. The mere mention of her name sends many of them into a ravenous fits of rage. Like Betty, her fans are confused on the definition of the word abuse. They frequently accuse others of abusing them, but when asked for specifics, they go silent. None of Betty's fans, to my knowledge, has ever stood up and clearly stated that Dan and Linda did not deserve what they got. Many of them have clearly stated that they got what they deserved. Betty's fans believe that until Dan began his affair with Linda, Betty ran a perfect house, was a perfect mother, and a wonderful human being. Now they believe that she is a perfect prisoner and that she would function perfectly in society should she be released. Betty's fans do not believe that Betty should have been convicted or imprisoned for her crimes. They bemoan the fact that prejudicial, unsubstantiated, and spurious evidence was not allowed by the judge, and believe that it is due to that she was convicted. The fact that she actually did kill 2 people doesn't seem to sink in. Betty's fans have expressed directly to a juror from the trial that they believe him to be an idiot. They effectively shut him up with abuse and harassment when he attempted to share his experience with others. Not all of Betty's fans indulge in all of these behaviors, but none of Betty's fans ever stand up against them. Betty's fans have private communications amongst themselves during which they strategize how to respond to their critics and how to shut them up. See, I would also like to read here something that Kimberly wrote during Betty's trial, which is Betty's oldest daughter, who witnessed everything. So this is a really accurate account of what happens, because I know Betty Broderick supporters love to pull up that Betty Stumbo book and claim that Betty Stumbo supposedly knows more things than Kim and the kids who are there, but I guess it's the way it is. Okay, here's her statement. Mom was always getting all dressed up and at the last minute saying, "I'm not going." Mom was always kind of weird. Mom would get mad at Dad all the time. Once, Mom picked up the stereo and threw it at him, and she locked him out of the house constantly. He'd come over to my window and whisper, "Kim, let me in." Kim said her mother would throw things and hit her and her siblings. Lee would always say, "Your spankings never hurt me." She was bratty. So Mom said, "Okay, next time you're bad, I'll hit you with a fly swatter." Lee was out in the yard and Mom went after her with the swatter and the little screen came off. So it was just a little wire and she kept hitting her. Lee had big welts all over her legs. I'd grab Danny and hide in the closet. She was always telling me they were getting a divorce. She'd say, "Who are you going to live with?" I was dying for Dad to divorce her. I'd say to Dad, "Just take me the day you leave." I was 18 and I discovered I was pregnant. When Mom found out, she sent a letter to my dad's whole family and called one of my friend's mothers. Whenever friends came to the house, she would talk about it. The whole world knew. Mom could never admit that she'd ever had a happy life. That would be admitting that she could get on with her life herself, and that Dad didn't ruin her life. Hating Dan and Linda became Mom's reason for living. Okay, and then Betty, her response to her own daughter's statement, or her testimony was, "Kim is a weak and impressionable idiot." Really don't know how anybody can defend this person, but I think she's indefensible.